Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, healing insecure attachment. I am speaking with Dr. Judy Ho. She is a triple board certified and licensed clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, a tenured associate professor at Pepperdine University, and a published author. Her third book, The New Rules of Attachment, is the topic of our conversation today. It focuses on healing insecure attachment styles at any age to optimize well-being, career, goal attainment, and relationships. Dr. Judy maintains a private practice in Manhattan Beach, California, where she specializes in comprehensive neuropsychological assessments and expert witness work. She regularly appears as an expert psychologist on television, podcasts, radio, and contributes to other media, including print and electronic periodicals. She was a co-host on the syndicate daytime television talk show The Doctors, co-host of CBS's Face the Truth, and host of the Supercharged Live podcast. Dr. Judy Ho is an avid researcher and is a two-time recipient of the National Institute of Mental Health Services Research Award. I will have her full bio in the show notes. We have covered the topic of attachment on the podcast before, and I will have links to those episodes as well. Today's episode is a fantastic episode, and you're going to learn so much. We talk about attachment and self-concept, the two main goals of attachment healing, how to meet the needs of your inner child and improve your self-concept, ways you can form a secure attachment with yourself, and she shares a bunch of practical exercises from her book. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening. Welcome, Judy. I am pleased you're here. Like I said, I finished the book, The New Rules of Attachment, just in time for this interview, and I really enjoyed how practical it was. So many quizzes and exercises, and it all comes together very well.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind words, and I really appreciate you reading.
Why don't we begin by you telling us, why should we care about attachment? What is attachment and why is it so important?
Well, attachment theory is based on the premise that some of our earliest relationships in life with our primary caregivers are the foundation for who you are, sets the stage for your self-concept and self-esteem, as well as how you relate to others and how much you believe in yourself. And attachment theory is super important because it basically affects every aspect of your life, from your romantic relationships to your family of origin relationships, to your friendships, to how you attack goals that you have for yourself and how you feel about yourself on a given day.
Okay. And this is not new on our podcast, but I think every expert delivers it differently. And so I want to ask you to give a short overview of the main attachment styles.
Definitely. So there's 4 attachment styles, 3 that are formed that are called insecure attachment styles, and 1 that is a secure attachment style. And individuals who have a secure attachment style essentially have a bit of a balance in their lives in terms of how they think about themselves, how they rely on others versus how independent they are. And they're more flexible when there's challenges and can be more resilient to a number of different problems that might arise. If you have one of the 3 insecure attachment styles, then it means that you cope in a specific way that may not actually be helpful in every area of life. So the first insecure attachment style is avoidant attachment style. And this is a person who may have grown up with parents who maybe shut them down when they expressed their emotions or seemed overwhelmed when they expressed emotions, especially negative ones, or they felt like they were constantly being rewarded and supported most when they were achieving, when they were bringing the family together with their achievements. As they get older, they tend to be the proverbial lone wolf. They tend to have more difficulties being intimate with people and letting their guard down. When things go awry, they tend to isolate more. And also, they tend to predicate their self-esteem on their achievements and their goals, and oftentimes are self-identified workaholics. The second insecure attachment style is the anxious attachment style. And this is an individual who may have grown up with parents who may have been inconsistent in the way that they were supportive of them and may have been dealing with their own emotions and just seem sometimes maybe even scattered or just not always present. And as a result, these individuals grow up to be adults who rely on others for their self-esteem. So they're constantly looking outwards for validation. They can be more prone to codependency behaviors because they think, well, if I support this person and I help them, then maybe one day when I need help, they'll be here for me. They have a harder time being alone for long periods of time. And generally, they may have lower self-esteem and see other people as having more or being more confident and more secure than they are. And then the last attachment style is called the disorganized attachment style. And I think this one has the most misperceptions about it when you look at what's out there on social media and online articles and just in people's general understanding. And basically, the disorganized style is someone who may have grown up in a childhood full of chaos. Maybe there was overt abuse or trauma of some sort. And they grow up essentially feeling like they're in fight or flight most of the time. And as a result, they can't really regulate emotionally very well. They can be hot and cold in relationships because they want to rely on the person, but then they also fear that that person is going to hurt them. And they may sometimes inevitably cause chaos in their own lives because subconsciously they're drawn to that because it's somewhat familiar.
And what's the most common attachment style in our society?
Yeah. So about 80% of people have insecure attachment style at least some of the time. And out of those people who have at least some of the time an insecure attachment style, avoidant and anxious are probably the most common, followed by disorganized.
Is there a way to know for a parent who is listening and saying, oh my gosh, does my child have a secure attachment with me? Are they signs? What could you say about that?
Yeah, I think you probably know that your child has secure attachment with you if generally they come to you when they need support, but also they are okay with being independent, at least with some given time to warm up. They're able to do their own thing. If you're not around, if you're not completely just, lording over them, they can still do things on their own. I think that it's a balance of being able to explore, knowing that they have you to come back to as a secure base. That's really one of the primary definitions of secure attachment.
And secure attachment doesn't mean you are inoculated from traumas and things like that later in life. Could you bust that myth for us?
Oh, yeah, definitely. First of all, I mean, secure attachment is not this, perfect person. Obviously, there's no such thing. It just means that they're a little bit more resilient than the average person. And of course, somebody with secure attachment can experience trauma later in life, can experience challenges and difficulties that they have a hard time coming back from. And I've also even worked with individuals who had a secure attachment for most of their childhood, but then they had a really pivotal adult relationship or a very pivotal adult loss or trauma. And then it did knock them off of the secure attachment side of things a little bit. And they ended up with a form of insecure attachment that came later in life rather than earlier in life. But the point of it all is that you can heal at any given time with awareness and with the practice of specific techniques. But sometimes it surprises people that, oh, okay, secure attachment. So that means that you just have it made. It's not true, right? We still can encounter multiple stressors and traumas that really hit us in a more significant way.
Yeah, true. And it's not like we all fall into really neat buckets of secure attachment, insecure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a mix of everything.
Yes. And that's another misunderstanding that somehow you're just sort of in one bucket, and it's almost like a personality type. People kind of think about it this sort of a long-term thing, right? And also that you just fit neatly into a bucket, and you don't. Most people that I know and most people that I've worked with in my practice are actually a combination style. They may be secure most of the time, but in their romantic relationships and at work, they tend to be more avoidant. Or maybe somebody is avoidant in their relationships with friends, but when it comes to romantic relationships, they show more of an anxious attachment style. So you see lots of combinations like that. And that's because we're multifaceted people. So we're much more kind of in between those buckets oftentimes rather than just neatly in one.
Yeah. Why do you think this attachment stuff or trauma picked up so much in our culture and social media in the recent few years? It seems like everybody's talking about this, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's probably because I think this is driven also, especially by our younger generations, but also people are just more aware of mental health. And just as a society, we're talking about it more, and the stigma is decreasing, even if it's still present. So people are starting to want to know the origins of their problems, the origins of their patterns that they want to eradicate, why relationships keep not working out, why they keep self-sabotaging, why they can't make more headway at work. And instead of just looking for a quick fix to the problem, I think there's more and more people who are saying, well, let's dig deeper. What's there? Right. And I think that that's how people are finding attachment styles, because it's these things that formed at a time when we were so young that we probably didn't even understand or grasp what it is. And yet it's having an impact on our behaviors and our functioning now. So there's value in looking there, at least in terms of being able to improve your life in the present.
Yeah. Are there counter theories to attachment theory?
Yeah, there are actually some counter theories to attachment theory. I don't know if they would be things that are, essentially this is a counter because we don't like attachment theory or we want to debunk it, but more so that there's maybe some theories out there that are more focused on present mindedness, right? Like, let's just talk about the problems now and let's just solve the problems now. And, actually one of those forms of therapy could be cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very scientific form of therapy, which I commonly practice with my patients. And I would say that there's so much value in that. But at the same time, if you learn these coping techniques and yet you still find yourself in the same patterns over and over, that's when there's value in looking backwards and saying, well, where did this come from if I want to stop this pattern from happening? Not just put a band-aid on it whenever it happens or cope with it when it happens, but more, I don't want to have these patterns happen anymore. I would like to reduce the amount of times these patterns keep happening.
Oh, I see. Okay. I love how you gave names to the attachment styles, right? The secure attachment. Maybe you can tell what you call them. I really enjoyed the names.
Oh, yeah. So I gave them different names because I felt like sometimes when you listen to the original names, there's such a negative connotation to them. And I really think that we should embrace the fact that even when you're in the middle of your healing journey, or you still have certain shadows of certain aspects of your insecure attachment, that there's pros to that too, especially if it's harnessed correctly. And so I really wanted to come up with terms that were less stigmatizing and didn't highlight just the negatives, especially for people who were insecurely attached. So for secure attached, I call these individuals connected explorers. That means that you generally have this positive view of others. Your sense of self isn't overly dependent on what others think of you, what happens in a given day, or your accomplishments in life, and that you're generally comfortable with emotional intimacy and can stay connected to people that matter to you. And the avoidant, I named the fiercely independent because they are really self reliant and they feel very comfortable chasing achievements. They oftentimes are leaders. People look up to them. They're super goal oriented and they generally like to fly solo. And of course, in certain situations, that could actually be a pro. I call the anxiously attached worried warriors. And that's because that's kind of how they are. They tend to be over analytical. They do have high anxiety about their relationships, and they're really happy to help people whenever they're in need. And even though sometimes that's coming from a place of not believing as much in themselves, you can see how much value that can have in a social circle. If you have somebody in your social circle who's a worried warrior, they're protective of you. They're thinking about you and they're willing to lend a hand whenever they can. And then finally, the disorganized attached is the surveillance specialist. And again, because of them constantly feeling like they're in fight or flight, they're really good at being vigilant to actual threats. And they can be very loyal. They can analyze things in a degree that really helps you to understand what could be the rewards versus what might be the threats in a situation. They can be very exacting, and some of that can actually be a positive in their life.
Do you struggle to keep your cool when your kids misbehave? Do you find yourself yelling or shaming them only to feel awful afterward? Are you ready to understand why you're feeling triggered and learn how to handle it better? Join Jen at your Parenting Mojo's Taming Your Triggers workshop. You'll uncover the real reasons behind your triggers. Here is a hint. It's not just about your child's behavior, and start healing past hurts. Gain new tools to meet both your needs and your child's needs, and feel triggered less often. Enrollment opens September 29. Jen offers sliding scale pricing and a money-back guarantee. Plus, I'll be in the workshop too. The first 10 people to sign up using my link will receive 3 50-minute group coaching calls with me. Don't miss out. Sign up at authenticparenting.com/workshop. That's authenticparenting.com/workshop. See you there. I'm glad you said that, because I don't want the listener to take away that, oh, most of us have insecure attachment. We are doomed, we're deficient, we're defective. In fact, each style has their own strengths and positive characteristics, correct? That we can harness and use in our life.
Absolutely. And I think that that's why it's so important to know them ahead of time, and to know that it's not all doom and gloom when you have an insecure attachment style.
A quick fun question. Do the dating websites match people based on their attachment styles?
That's such a good question. I don't think they have an algorithm for that, although maybe they should. No, I mean, it's funny because, there's a joke that anxiously attached people tend to be attracted to avoidantly attached people and vice versa. And they just keep essentially re-traumatizing each other because the anxiously attached needs a lot more emotional validation. And then the avoidant attached just keeps like running away whenever they reach out for more intimacy. But I actually think that all the attachment styles can get along with all the other attachment styles, but it takes a lot of acknowledgement of your own style and also understanding of how the other person might prefer to be treated. So in some ways, I see it as kind of the manifestation of the love languages by Gary Chapman, that, when somebody's avoidantly attached, they want to be reinforced in a specific way. And it may not be the same way that you feel validated, but if you know that that's how they feel validated, maybe there's something that you can do to help them feel supported in their form of their preferences.
Oh my gosh, you mentioned the love languages. That's another thing that is so hyped up in our society. And I don't think it has a scientific base, right?
I don't really think it's that scientific. I think that it's more just about an idea of learning about other people. I think that that's what I take from that particular set of work. I don't think that the research is necessarily very robust, but I get that the main point is more about, hey, everybody has different things that they prefer or like in their relationships, right? And so sometimes you think, well, I did this for them. Why don't they like it? It's like, well, maybe they don't like that. They like something else. So it seems like such a basic concept, but I think oftentimes we operate from our own viewpoint and we forget that, oh, actually, that doesn't help that person feel loved. Giving them a gift, that's nice for you, but for them, they just wanted you to sit next to them and talk to them for an hour, Yeah. So
it's so common these days. Like in everyday conversations, people say, well, my love language is this, and it's very, very common. So could you tell the thought patterns that come with each attachment style so that the listener can identify themselves with a particular style? I found that very useful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really thought that we really needed to think about attachment in terms of self-talk. And that's because self-talk is universal, it's ubiquitous to the human experience. And also our self-talk drives so much of our beliefs about ourselves, the way that we feel, and then the actions that we take. And then it, of course, becomes like a whole cycle, it feeds back onto your thoughts, and so on and so on. And so I really wanted to explain that essentially the attachment styles, they each have their prototypical self talk. And each of the attachment styles have four statements that probably resonate with people from that type. Either they'll say, well, one or two of these statements I say all the time, or they'll say, I say all four of these statements, but that was a really big part of why I wanted to build that out, because I think that it could be of value to people to understand how they think. So the person who has a avoidant attachment style tends to have self-talk that sounds like this: I'm only as good as my last achievement. I must be in control at all times. I keep others at arm's length. And when the going gets tough, I go it alone. The anxiously attached, my worried worriers, they tend to have thoughts like, I'm not as worthy as others. I need to rescue everyone. I fear being on my own, and I have to analyze everything. And then people with disorganized attachment tend to have self-talk like, I deserve to suffer. I hate you. Don't leave me. I can't control my emotions, and my life is in constant chaos. And if you contrast that with the self-talk of the secure attached, notice that it's not that everything is perfect and wonderful, but that there's more balance. So people who are connected explorers tend to say things like, I believe in and like myself. I can handle what comes my way. I can affect positive outcomes in my life. And I can be independent and rely on others too.
Yeah, this is great. I thought that was really good. Instead of like reading a whole chapter about the description, it just summarizes. And you can definitely, by reading that, put yourself in a specific bucket.
Exactly.
Okay, so another thing I want to ask you is attachment and self-concept.
Yeah. Attachment and self-concept are so inextricably related. And I think that that is actually the key reason why you should understand your attachment styles and see how it really plays a role in your life. Essentially, when you're born, from the very first moments of your existence, you're forming ideas about yourself and the world around you through a series of situations, interactions, particularly with our primary caregivers at that time. And these first years, they're a critical period of brain development and knowledge acquisition. And through our attachments, we discover how to communicate our needs and how people near us respond, and whether we feel secure and safe emotionally. And the experiences that are repeated or reinforced over time starts to create these emotional imprints that profoundly impact the formation of our core beliefs. And our core beliefs essentially are a body of thoughts about how we think about ourselves, how we interact with other people, and how we respond to life's challenges. And that's what really goes into the formation of your self-concept.
And this morning I was listening to the audio book of your book, and you read it. It's your voice. And I was just going over the certain chapters, and I heard this, that when there are two major goals of attachment healing. And while reading, I skipped that part, I guess. But when I was listening, that caught my attention. I'm like, that's what I'm going to ask her about. So what are the two major goals of attachment healing?
Yeah, I think the two major goals of attachment healing, I mean, there's so many, but I think one of them is to really reshape your self-concept and your belief about yourself, to have a healthier, more stable self-concept. And then I think the second overarching goal is so that you can live the life that you want for yourself, that you want to live. And for everybody, that's different. Everybody values different things. Maybe you value a better career, maybe you value more meaningful relationships, maybe it's a combination of both those things. Maybe you don't want to stop self-sabotaging so much. Maybe you want to be able to finally achieve your personal fitness goals, but you keep finding yourself derailed. But healing your attachment would be the foundational ingredient to being able to actually reach all of your goals, because then you have a much more secure self-concept and you believe that you deserve those good outcomes. And that's really key.
Okay, do we need to form a secure attachment with ourselves in order to heal, with others, or both?
Yeah, it would be lovely if everybody in our lives who we were in important relationships with wanted to do the same things that we did. And when we wanted to embark on self development, they're like, hey, I'm right there with you. I want to do that with you. But most of the times, you're going to find that you might be out of step with some of these individuals, or maybe they're just not interested, right? Or maybe sometimes I'll hear from my patients, oh, I try to talk to my parents about this, but they're just like, shut me down. And the good news is really the main thing that you need to work on is a secure attachment to yourself, like building that foundation essentially with yourself, within yourself. That's the most important relationship that needs to be securely attached. And so you don't actually need everybody around you to want to do it, to be curious about it. You can heal yourself at any time, at any stage in your life.
Yeah, yet another popular concept, hashtag self-healers, right?
Exactly. They're like, I just want people to understand me once and for all and understand how much pain they cause. It's like, yeah, that would be nice, but it doesn't happen all the time, you know?
Yeah, okay. So where does one begin then? This healing the attachment wounds. Well, one question, do the securely attached people, the connected explorers, need to do some attachment work as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. And I do think,
What do they need to do?
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is sort of like maintenance and practice of the things that they're doing well. And as we talked about with people with secure attachment, I've worked with plenty of people who actually were securely attached for a lot of their life and then ended up experiencing certain stressors and traumas or losses, and it just shook their attachment style. And so sometimes your securely attached self is still there, but maybe you've lost touch with it. And so I have sections in my book that talk about how we get back there and ways to continue to foster and reinforce your secure attachment.
Could you walk us through that exercise of the self-concept snapshot? I don't know if it's lengthy. How many questions are there? Maybe you can read the questions and we can have the listener do this exercise with us and
Yeah, definitely.
calculate their score.
It's not too lengthy, so I think it's good. It's a good one to read through. But I'm going to read each of the statements below. And then as you're listening, choose the option that best describes you. One would be not true. Two would be sometimes or partially true. And then three would be mostly or definitely true. So just keep writing down the numbers to each statement, and then we'll add them up at the end. Okay. So one is not true. Two, sometimes or partially. Three, mostly or definitely true. First question, if I had the opportunity, or not question, but statement, if I had the opportunity, I wouldn't change many things about myself. Two, I have confidence in my decision making. Three, I don't worry excessively about what others think about me. Four, I like myself even when I'm in conflict with someone else. Five, I value myself even when I make mistakes. Six, I believe my efforts contribute to my success. Seven, I have control over my reactions to difficult situations. Eight, I like myself. Nine, I can start and finish projects without others' help and approval. 10, I have a clear sense of who I am. 11, I have positive and admirable traits. And 12, I can overcome challenges when I try hard.
And how does the scoring work?
So once you add up your total score, it'll range between 12 and 36. And the higher your score, the stronger your self-concept. So I like people to take the self-concept inventory to get a sense of where they are on the spectrum. And then when they start to do the exercises in my book to heal their attachment or to strengthen their attachment, then they take the self-concept snapshot again and see what the changes are.
Yeah, I love that. There are so many wonderful practices in your book, but a few stood out to me, and I'm hoping you can talk about them. Closeness circle. That was a that was a good one.
Yeah, I feel like most of us probably haven't taken time to really think about our closeness circle. This is an exercise that's used to understand the degree of connection and intimacy you have with other people in your life. I think it's really helpful for identifying any challenging patterns in relationships and how you can create and maintain strong connections with others. And because by doing this exercise, you become more aware of your available social support systems, you can determine with whom you can develop even more meaningful relationships with and be vulnerable and intimate with, especially when you're going through something stressful. So this exercise starts with just opening your journal or taking out a piece of paper, and you draw a small circle in the middle of the paper and write your name in it. And then after that, you draw 3 concentric circles around it, like the rings on a tree, with enough space to write in between them. So you would start with the circle right outside of the one with your name on it. And this next ring would be called the anchor. It represents people in your life who you trust the most and feel closest to. These are people who you likely would let your guard down with. You feel like you can be vulnerable with them. And this first part of the exercise is just about writing down names of people who you feel fit this description. And it's okay to be honest about it. Sometimes people feel like they have to put their family members there. But if that's not really who they are in your life, you don't have to put them there. Just put whoever you think it's truly in this particular part of the circle. And then the next ring outside of that is called the buoy. So it's kind of like the buoy floating in an ocean. They're reliable, but they can also move around a bit. You may not talk to them about everything that's intimate, everything that is, closest to your heart, but you might talk to them about certain topics, or maybe you go to them for certain forms of advice. And so that would be the people that you would write down in this buoy area. And then the last ring is called the boat. So these are people who you can rely on for companionship or entertainment. Maybe you guys share some activities that you like, but maybe they're not the first people you go to when you need to solve a problem or you want to talk about something that's more personal to you. However, there's still a value in your life because sometimes you don't want to talk. You just want to go on a hike with your favorite hiking buddy, or you just want to go have a spa day with a couple of friends that this is one of the shared activities you've had over the years. And so just knowing all of this, though, is really helpful. It's a starting point in assessing the people in your life that serve different functions for you. And then you can also use it to think about, well, who do I want to develop a deeper relationship with? So you can say, well, this person's in the boat right now, but maybe I want to move them closer. Maybe I want them to be more of like a buoy or an anchor for me. And what are some things that I can do to invest in that relationship?
Yeah. And with the loneliness epidemic, maybe some folks find that they don't have anchors. I think this exercise gives a clarity. And oftentimes, I think people, maybe the anxiously attached people, want everything from one particular person. They want their needs to be met, by that person. I think doing this exercise illustrates that, you can have different people for different things, right? You can have, yeah. So I like that. Life at a glance. What's the purpose of that exercise? That's a hard one, I have to say. I tried to do that a couple of times. I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, it could feel a little overwhelming, I think, the life at a glance exercise, because you're like, whoa, life at a glance. I got to start from the beginning and take myself all the way to here. And I would say that if you find that a little challenging to wrap your head around, you can do it in sections. You can say, okay, let me just do from whatever I remember as a child to high school, to the end of high school. And then from the time I'm 18 to the time I'm 30, you can kind of break it up so that you don't necessarily feel like you just, kind of, whoa, I have to, capture my entire life in this one snapshot. But the reason why it's important to do it is it's really helpful to understand how your past experiences are affecting how you're operating now. And to see maybe the impacts of your attachment style and how you perceive the importance or meaning of certain events in your life, this is a really great place to start. And it can really help with deeper understanding. And so it basically helps you to call out themes and ideas that you have about multiple events in your life. Why did I write this down? Why is it important to me? You start to find out these themes about the way you think.
Could you explain how to go about then doing it?
Oh, yeah. So you just start with, again, piece of paper, open up your journal, and then you write with a vertical line marking the end of the line on the left and then vertical line marking the end of the line on the right. So you basically draw one horizontal line and then you have your vertical lines that mark each side. And then on the very leftmost vertical mark, you'd write your date of birth. And then on the very right vertical mark, you'd write today's date. And then in between, you can start filling in memorable dates and events that come to mind, as well as your age at the time of the event. And so, a really easy way to do this is to just give essentially kind of write down what comes to you. I don't think that it's really about judging yourself and saying, oh, I should write this down. It should be important. It's just like whatever comes to mind. It's kind of like a free writing activity. And if it does feel overwhelming, then just give yourself a time limit. Set your timer on your phone for 10 minutes and just see what comes up, right? You can always go back in and fill in more things. But a lot of times people will write down things like, okay, like this is my high school graduation date, or this is when I had a child, or when I got married, or when I started a job. And that's fine. You can start with those things. You can start with other things too. Everyone's timeline is going to look different. Some things that you might want to consider are things like your earliest memory, your first important friendship, your first romantic relationship, birth or death of a family member or important friend, an achievement, job changes, promotions, engagement, marriage, some of your most cherished memories, some of your most devastating memories, things that you're proud of, things that you may regret. It can be anything really. But in my book, I give kind of a list of things that you can think about. I just named several of them now that can help prompt you in terms of what to write down. But this is actually a version of a therapeutic activity that's done oftentimes in therapy. And it's a very powerful exercise when you can do it and then review it and talk about the meaningfulness and significance of these events.
Yeah, it also helps create that coherent narrative, right? I remember in the book, the guy, your client that you talk about, he put certain things and he omitted important things. It was all about achievement for him. He put mostly achievement-based things. Yeah, I think it's good to create that through line of our life, definitely, because we tend to remember certain things, and it's important. Then I have a Wheel of Life exercise, which it was such a joy to find it in your book too. I am familiar with this exercise, not frequently, but occasionally I do it for myself. And not frequently that I see it in places,
Yeah, yeah. I think it's such a great tool. And I think it's also a good tool to start with if you feel like, oh, like this is my first try at doing mental health related exercises and I'm not really sure how I feel about them. I mean, people sometimes have these mental blocks about doing things, right? And I think the Wheel of Life is so good because it's so concrete and it's so action oriented. And so it's really cool that you're already familiar with it. But basically, the Wheel of Life concept, it's been around for 70 plus years and it was attributed first to Paul J. Meyer. And essentially, there's a lot of different versions of this tool, but my version essentially is just to draw a circle on a piece of paper and then divide the circle into 8 equal parts and then label each of the sections of the pie with the following categories. There's 8 categories: family of origin relationships, current family relationships, physical health, mental health, work and career, romantic relationships, friendships, and self-image and self-esteem. After you label each of these pieces of the pie, you'll color in the pieces of the pie, indicating your current level of satisfaction for this area in your life. So the outer boundary of the circle would represent a 10, which means that you're the most satisfied. And then the middle point where all the lines intersect represents a 0, meaning you're the least satisfied. And you would try to use a whole spectrum of number ratings. A 10 rating does not mean that the area of life is perfect. It just means that you're currently satisfied with how it's going. And so once you do this, you have a really good visual presentation of what areas of life are going well for you, what are strengths right now, and then what areas might need the most attention. And because you're shading them in and color coding them, it's like this very, very easy to see picture of your life at a glance, which is why I really, really like this exercise.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all those exercises. What's the difference between self-esteem and self-worth?
Yeah, so self-esteem and self-worth, I think, are somewhat interchangeable. Self-esteem, I think it's mostly talked about, though, when we kind of really get down to it, as, how much you like yourself, how much you like yourself, how much you believe in your ability to accomplish certain things. Self-worth, I think, is even deeper than that. It's just, am I inherently a worthy person? Am I a valuable person? And I think that most people probably would find that they are a valuable person in certain situations of life, but it's when you make a mistake, it's when there's something really troubling going on. Do you still feel like you have worth? And that, I think, is a fundamental issue that a lot of people who have insecure attachment will have a hard time saying yes to. they only feel like they have worth conditionally in certain situations. But when things hit the fan, they're much more likely to beat themselves up or to not feel worthy.
Yeah. So self-worth is attached to our attachment style, derives from that. And self-esteem, we develop it through our interactions with people and life. And
Yeah, that's definitely one way to think about it. Self-esteem can still be related to your attachment, but I think that self-esteem is sometimes developed more situationally. Somebody could have great self-esteem at work, not the best self-esteem in their romantic relationship, or vice versa, right? So there is a conditional aspect to it already. So somebody who has insecure attachment, they may actually conditionally have great self-esteem in certain areas of life, but it's really that question of self-worth that they have a harder time answering.
I feel like most people struggle with self-worth. I don't know. I've never met anyone, at least, who hasn't struggled with self-worth. Obviously, to varying degrees, it's a spectrum, but I feel like it's such a common unifying experience.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think so too. And I think that it's really hard, right? It's hard because a lot of times you did feel like you had more worth and then somebody made you question it. It could be one situation, one person, right? So I think that is really, really difficult, to have self-worth all the time and to really feel like you deserve good things all the time. I think that that's probably what a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. And so self-esteem, someone may have really high self-esteem through performance, achievement, and accolades and things like that, but really struggle with low self-worth, inadequate self-worth. How about the opposite? I don't know. The opposite may not be true. If you have adequate self-worth, then maybe you have adequate self-esteem as well.
Yeah, I think that generally, if you have good self-worth, you probably have pretty stable self-esteem.
Yeah. I feel like most people who have, again, like I said, it's a spectrum, right? Who have low self-worth try to boost or cure, so to speak, their self-worth through self-esteem,
Hmm.
right? Isn't that the case?
Yeah, I think that they maybe look for self-worth in places that are maybe sometimes fleeting. They're not as foundational and they can't be as stable. And when things change, when circumstances change, when you ultimately, like everybody does, has a failure and in some aspect of their work or their relationship, then all of a sudden everything's back to square one and they feel bad about themselves completely again.
Hmm. This is wonderful. I'm really enjoying it, and it's going so fast, just like the book. The book has so many wonderful practices. I can't emphasize that enough. I feel like people who enjoy this conversation, they also need to get the book. They have to do the exercises. We have a little bit of time. How do you think we should conclude this conversation? Are there quick tips? I hate to say that, quick tips for each attachment style, but maybe a practice that can help all of the people.
Definitely. I think maybe what we should, close on is the practice of self-compassion, which is a guiding principle to strengthen all of the types. And actually in my book, I have self-compassion strategies, just like a whole section about it, just because it's vital to any healing process because it helps you to acknowledge and validate your pain and suffering without judging yourself for having these difficult emotions or maybe even doing things you regret later. It just helps reduce self criticism by encouraging self kindness and acceptance, which, of course, is going to guide you to be a better person. If you actually believe that, what you did was so terrible or that the way that you feel is something that's intractable, then you're not going to be able to have hope and to actually change in a positive way. So that's why self-compassion is such an important ingredient. So the good thing about self-compassion is that it's a skill. It's like any other skill that you can work on and build. And so a couple of different things that I really like to do for self-compassion. One of my favorite is a loving kindness meditation. And we can do a quick version of this to close if you have a couple of minutes. So you can begin by getting comfortable in a chair with your feet on the floor, or you can sit on the floor, you can lay down wherever you are and decide to take this on the whatever way you choose. So take a few deep breaths and close your eyes and become more aware of your breath and how with each inhale it connects to and nourishes your body. And with each exhale, breathe out stress, tension, and negative feelings. And notice your thoughts and bring a gentle curiosity to them. Instead of judging yourself or thinking certain thoughts or allowing certain thoughts to fill your mind, simply observe them, note that they're there, and move on. Now imagine a person that you care about and a person who supports you. Imagine that this person is in front of you right now. Begin to send loving kindness to this person by saying to them either out loud or silently, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live in peace, and may you receive what you desire in life. Notice the feelings and sensations that arise as you send these kind thoughts to this person that you care for. Now recall a person with whom you may be in conflict, or you could think about someone who you've had conflict in the past and with whom you haven't yet had a resolution to your disagreement. Imagine that this person is in front of you now. Begin to send loving kindness to this person by saying to them either out loud or silently, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live in peace, and may you receive what you desire in life. Notice the feelings and sensations that arise as you send these kind thoughts to this person with whom you're in conflict. Now bring your attention back to yourself. Focus on your breathing and the sensations in your body, and begin to send loving kindness to yourself by saying either out loud or silently, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live in peace, and may I receive what I desire in life. Notice the feelings and sensations that arise as you send these kind thoughts to yourself.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you shared. One last question. You were on, tell us about your experience with certain shows, TV shows.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of my favorite experiences was being a co-host on The Doctors. It was so awesome to just be able to interview other individuals who were doing great things in the mental health and physical health space. I had an amazing executive producer and an awesome team, and I loved my coworkers. I loved all the other doctors I worked with. So I really miss that environment. It was a lot of fun and definitely one of the highlights of my career.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Judy Ho. It's been a pleasure and an honor. I wish you good luck. And everybody, definitely you need this book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your insights.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. What are your main takeaways? Wasn't this a fantastic episode? What did you learn about attachment that you didn't know before? Did you find the practical exercises helpful? I love hearing from you. I welcome your feedback, comments, and questions. Go to authenticparenting.com/contact and see the many ways that you can get in touch. If you want to leave a voicemail, which I prefer, you can call the number 732-763-2576. If you enjoy the podcast and find it helpful, you can support the show by rating or reviewing it, by making a one-time donation, or by becoming a patron on patreon.com. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seawold. Thank you so much for listening.